Good evening and welcome to the Hairenik Media Newscast. The Artsakh genocide and the plight of Armenian prisoners illegally held in Baku were discussed at the Congressional Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission hearing. Congressman Chris Smith, who chaired the hearing, exposed how the Aliyev regime uses propaganda and scapegoating to manipulate public anger. Smith stated, "We need to work for the release of political prisoners and POWs held by the government of Azerbaijan, to protect Armenian cultural heritage, and to uphold the right to return one day to live in peace and freedom in Nagorno-Karabakh." Former Artsakh State Minister and human rights defender Vardanyan detailed the Artsakh genocide, stating that the Aliyev regime uses anti-Armenian hatred to distract, divide, and dominate, fueling atrocities and human rights violations. He urged the world to reject this narrative and promote peace and democracy. Vardanyan also exposed Azerbaijan's use of the green energy agenda to mask repression and dispossession, warning the international community not to be deceived. Former Artsakh State Minister Vardanyan's lawyer Jared Gencer also condemned the Azerbaijani regime's extraordinary repression, demanding the release of all political prisoners in Azerbaijan, not just those connected to the Artsakh conflict. He stated the Aliyev regime is using global crisis to strengthen its authoritarian control. David Vardanyan, son of Vardanyan, appealed to President Trump in a Fox News op-ed, urging him to pressure Azerbaijan for the release of his father and other Armenian captives, referencing Trump's pre-election promise to protect persecuted Armenian Christians. The Armenian National Committee International has appealed to officials of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, to support the release of the 23 Armenian captives held in Baku, including former Artsakh leaders. ANC-International proposed that the OSCE activate its available mechanisms to assess Azerbaijan's legal processes in light of its commitments to the OSCE, to document the facts, and to provide recommendations. OSCE officials were also given information on Azerbaijan's judicial system deficiencies and international support for the captives. On April 24, Armenians worldwide commemorated the 1.5 million souls lost in the 1915 genocide. Yet EU Foreign Policy Chief Kallas chose the very next day for a visit to Azerbaijan, and pointedly not neighboring Armenia, in what was meant to be a regional tour. Several members of national parliaments across Europe and the European Parliament criticized Kallas's visit to Baku, noting that she chose to visit authoritarian Azerbaijan while bypassing Armenia. In a statement, the European Armenian Federation for Justice and Democracy expressed deep concern over the resumption of U.S.-Azerbaijan negotiations on a new partnership and cooperation agreement under the new head of EU diplomacy, Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas. The EAFJD stated that Kallas appeared to ignore Azerbaijan's genocidal policy, ethnic cleansing of Armenians, and growing hostile rhetoric towards the EU, urging her to consider the European Parliament's consistent stance since 2018 against deepening EU-Azerbaijan ties due to Azerbaijan's human rights violations and refusal to recognize the rights of Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan reportedly met privately with British and Turkish intelligence chiefs without any Armenian officials present. Additionally, Pashinyan has agreed once again to Azerbaijan's demand to dissolve the OSCE Minsk group. The Armenian government has hired US-based lobbying and PR firm Mercury Public Affairs, which previously represented the Turkish embassy in Washington. Despite numerous alternatives in the US capital, Armenia will pay Mercury $50,000 monthly to promote its standing with the US. This decision comes despite Mercury's past work for Turkish interests. The firm reportedly dropped Turkey as a client during the 2020 Artsakh war after pressure from the Armenian diaspora. The move also aligns with a trend of groups linked to Armenia engaging with firms tied to Turkish and Azerbaijani lobbying efforts. The Armenian government extended its relief program for forcibly displaced Artsakh residents for 2 months. Originally planned to cover only vulnerable groups from April 1st, the program will now continue for all displaced persons as social program reforms are being developed and evaluated. Support for vulnerable groups is also delayed for 2 months. The building that housed a representation of the Republic of Artsakh in Yervan, formerly the property of the Artsakh government, has officially been placed under the control of the government of Armenia. Once mortgaged for $800,000 by Artsakh's former president Arayik Harutyunyan, now imprisoned in Baku, the building transfer coincides with new legislation requiring Artsakh-registered entities to re-register in Armenia by year's end. The government will now manage pledged properties like this one, assuming legal rights while honoring existing financial obligations. Azerbaijan's campaign to erase Armenian history in Artsakh has taken a disturbing turn: luxury tourism. Despite displacing over 120,000 Armenians, Azerbaijan now promotes the region as an exotic Azeri destination. Armenian culinary traditions like Jengelov huts are rebranded as Azeri flatbreads, and travel agencies quietly advertise trips on platforms like Travel and Leisure, deliberately hiding the region's true history, violent past, and the forced displacement of its Armenian population. 13 international tourist groups have already visited, and forums in Stepanakert draw select academics, providing legitimacy to the regime's false narrative. This is cultural erasure marketed as tourism. The call to action is clear: boycott these trips, expose complicity, and defend historical truth. Despite passing a law declaring intent to begin the EU accession process, Armenia has not yet submitted a formal application to Brussels. EU Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos confirmed this in a recent interview. The law, signed April 4th, reflects public will, driven by the successful Eurovote petition, but does not yet launch formal negotiations. The measure affirms Armenia's goal to strengthen democracy, security, and rule of law within an EU-aligned framework. Moscow has issued warnings as Armenia edges closer to the EU. Although Armenia's new law is currently symbolic, Russian officials say that deeper integration will eventually conflict with Armenia's commitments to the Eurasian Economic Union, the EEU. Areas of concern include trade, customs, and regulatory frameworks. A senior Russian diplomat emphasized that Russia holds legal tools to protect EEU interests if Armenia's trajectory breaches treaty obligations. Currently, Russia accounts for over 41% of Armenia's trade, while the EU's share stands at just under 8%. During his first official visit to Armenia, Georgian President Mikhail Kavelashvili met with Armenian officials, including the President and Prime Minister, highlighting Armenia's importance as a trading partner and source of tourism. Discussions included simplifying cross-border travel and promoting regional stability, with President Khachaturian commending Georgia's efforts to facilitate dialogue between Armenia and Azerbaijan. At the Mother See of Holy Echmiadzin, His Holiness Karekin II, Catholicos of all Armenians, received the Georgian president and conveyed his appreciation for Georgia's mediation efforts in the return of 15 Armenian prisoners of war and its supportive stance towards the Armenian community in Georgia. In Yervan, the head of Non-Nork district, Dikran Dermarkarian, physically assaulted activist Artur Chahoyan along with several administration employees. The confrontation occurred after Chahoyan informed the district head he would attend a public meeting. Upon arrival, an employee warned him he had insulted everyone in the building. Moments later, Chahoyan was attacked by multiple individuals, including Dermarkarian himself. According to media reports, Chahoyan later gave a police statement. As of this broadcast, none of the attackers have been detained. Amnesty International has accused Armenian authorities of using unlawful force against demonstrators during anti-government protests in 2024. The human rights group stated in a report that these actions resulted in 101 injuries, including 17 police officers and 98 detentions. While at least 15 individuals were later charged with hooliganism and violating public order, no law enforcement officers were indicted or charged after an inquiry into the police response's proportionality and legality. In regional developments, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian announced during an official visit to Azerbaijan that Nagorno-Karabakh is an inseparable part of Azerbaijan's territory. Pezeshkian's trip came amid a history of strained Iran-Azerbaijan relations, with tensions fueled by Iran's concerns over Baku's deepening ties with Israel and the armed attack on the Azerbaijani embassy in Tehran in January 2023. This was Pezeshkian's first visit to Baku since taking office in July 2024. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly issued a heartfelt statement on Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day, pledging to keep the memory of the 1.5 million victims alive and connecting the tragedy to the 2023 mass displacement of Armenians from Artsakh. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and the Liberal Party also emphasized ending genocide denial, addressing the forced displacement of Armenians, and reversing the illegal blockade of the Lachin corridor. In local community news, on April 27, the Chicago Armenian community commemorated the 110th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide at the Armenian All Saints Apostolic Church. The event themed Honor, Advocate, Remember included a joint divine liturgy, a presentation of flags and anthems, and powerful speeches from former Artsakh State Minister Artsakh Beklaryan on the region's humanitarian crisis, and ANCA Communications Director Elizabeth Chulchian on the importance of advocacy. ANC Illinois co-chair Ken Hachikian highlighted local advocacy and introduced young leader Sona Papazian, who shared her experience lobbying lawmakers. The program concluded with a prayer for the martyrs and Armenian unity. On April 25th, the Armenian Cultural and Educational Center and the Armenian National Committee of Eastern Massachusetts co-hosted a screening of Sarin Hayrabedian's documentary, My Sweet Land. The event, held to commemorate the 110th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, drew a large audience, including State Senator William Brownsberger, clergy, and around 200 community members. The film, following an 11-year-old boy in Artsakh, aimed to educate viewers on the impact of conflict and the resilience of the Armenian people. Speakers, including ACC President Dr. Vache Seraderian and ANC's Dr. Vazrik Chiloyan, connected the historical genocide to the recent events in Artsakh, emphasizing the ongoing struggle for justice, recognition, and the restoration of Armenian lands. The event concluded with a Q&A session with the filmmaker. This successful community screening stands in stark contrast to the experience at UC Berkeley, where the university's Human Rights Center canceled a planned screening of My Sweet Land. This decision, reportedly made after Azerbaijani diplomatic pressure, was met with strong condemnation from Armenian student groups who viewed it as complicity in genocide denial. April 30 marked 34 years since Armenian national hero Tatul Gerbeyan gave his life defending Artsakh during Operation Ring, a brutal ethnic cleansing campaign carried out by Soviet and Azerbaijani forces. Gerbeyan's words and heroism remain etched in Armenian memory, a reminder of the ongoing fight for dignity and truth. That's all for tonight's broadcast. Thank you for joining, and don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. Good night.